Hi, thanks for tuning in. This is the ASX and Sectors weekly chart analysis for the week ending 13th of March 2026. The first chart is the S&P ASX 200 index, the XJO, and you can see that price has pulled back from the recent highs up here. It's attempting to hold on at this breakdown line here. If it fails to do so, price will almost certainly come back to this level. But it's making a decent attempt to recover and come back to this breakdown line here. We'll see how successful that is. It's mostly the financial sector, which is the largest sector on the Australian Stock Exchange, that's seen this attempt to recover. Most of the other sectors are pushing back down to the next lower level. The mid-cap sector. The mid-cap sector is often the leader on the Australian Stock Exchange because it excludes all those very, very large cap stocks, which play such a big part in the parent index. And you can see that after 5 weeks of sideways trading through here, the market has pretty much broken down this week. It's not really an attempt to break down. It does look like a price breakdown. So we'll just have to wait and see where the market heads from here. I'm guessing it's probably down to this level at the moment, very close to it. There'll probably be an attempt to support at this level. So in here like this, whether it'll be successful or not, I'm not sure. The market is being very reactive at the moment, reactive to the overseas events that are taking place. It's not really trading on its own merits to a large degree. It's reacting to what's happening overseas and what's happening on overseas markets. That makes markets like this very difficult to trade. The Small Ordinaries Index, and they've also most likely broken down this week. 5 weeks of sideways trading, very similar to the mid-caps, and price really has broken down and is trading well below the previous support level through here. The market's just hanging there at the moment, so it's either overshot its level or it's got further to go, and I expect it's probably going to come down to this level here and move down towards that over the next week. That would be the next logical level lower. It seems unlikely it's going to recover up to here, so I expect that this level through here is where this market will head to in the near term. This is the ASX financial sector, the largest sector on the Australian Stock Exchange by quite some way. You've got the highs of the range through there. The market has attempted to support here. Price broke down from the highs, but on reduced volume, still above average, but reduced volume. This week, the price moved lower and then recovered to close back up near the week's high and adjacent to the previous bar's close. So there's an attempt to support the market here. There's certainly been capital pushed into this market. I'm not sure how strong it's going to be, whether it can push up towards the highs again, but it may find support through here, or at least attempt to find support through here, perhaps in a range in here like this, in there, rather than continue breaking down like the rest of the market. At this point in time, though, it's just an attempt to support the market. It's certainly not a successful attempt at this point in time. This is the metals and mining subsector, and prices pulled back to the previous support level in here. Spread narrowed considerably this week on still pretty good volume, just slightly above the average. So it was genuine trading, and there is an attempt to support the market. You can see spread narrowed considerably from the previous bar. Volume was almost the same. The close was a little off the week's low, but just the fact that the spread narrowed considerably as price traded back to previous support suggests that there is an attempt to support the market here. Once again, whether it's going to be successful or not is not clear at the moment, but there's certainly an attempt underway to support this market. This is the ASX gold sector. This market has also seen price pull back. It's pulled back below the previous support here. It's threatening to break down. It's probably back to that level. Yes, it is. Volume increased this week, but spread reduced, albeit slightly, over the previous bar. So there was some sort of attempt to support this market. The sellers remained in control, or at least held the upper hand, it appears, because the close was right down near the week's low. It did close at an interesting level, a logical level, where prices found support previously. I expect there'll be an attempt to support the market, probably in between these zones. If price does continue lower, the next lower level, you've got a minor level through there, the next lower level is going to come through here. So you can see where the market's going to go to if the weakness continues. I expect the market might just find support between these two previous support zones. But I expect the market may attempt to find support between these two previous support levels. This is the ASX energy sector. Energy is pretty hot at the moment with the events on overseas markets. You can see price has pushed higher. Little test for supply here after the market popped up above this breakout line. Then the market accelerated higher on this bar. There was considerable testing for supply below the previous bar's close before it continued higher this week, although the thrust higher was nowhere near as strong considering volume increased. So there was some supply being drawn out up here. Perhaps the market thinks it's a little overdone at this point in time. That may see the market testing for supply again or attempting to consolidate next week, probably in this level here. In response, it will seriously depend on what happens on overseas markets. Oil was up on Friday overseas, so you may see an early attempt to push higher, and unless that's sustained, you'll possibly see price come back and move into some sort of consolidation pattern. That said, if the oil price continues higher and other energy prices, gas and coal in particular, you'll just see the market continue higher. So it'll be dependent on what happens with the commodities themselves. The healthcare sector continues to sell down. This market has appeared to be attempting to consolidate a number of times previously and has failed each time so far. It's failed again here by the looks. This is still threatening to break down here, but volume was lower, although it remains slightly above the average. The market's certainly threatening to break down again. We'll just have to wait and see. There may be some reversal or attempt to reverse in here, but it's certainly not looking strong. It's certainly looking weak. And this is a good example why you shouldn't really accumulate along with the accumulators, because if things don't work out, they just dump. Then you get caught holding the bag. You're much better off waiting for the market, especially if you're long only, to turn and confirm a breakout before you join in to the party. This is the ASX industrial sector, and it's also threatening to break down. In fact, it may have done so. It's pretty clear break and close below previous support. Volume was pretty high. I'd wait for confirmation on this. What you may see here is an attempt to recover, which fails, and then price continues lower. If price, however, does continue lower next week, this will most likely become a confirmed breakdown. This is consumer staples, and this market's often considered a defensive sector. You can see that once the weakness came in to the markets generally, price pushed up, tested for supply, then accelerated higher. It did close well off the week's high here, so there was some supply drawn out. There was a secondary attempt to push higher which failed on an increase in volume. So once again, supply was drawn out. In response to that supply, prices pulled back. On still pretty good volume, it was slightly reduced but remained above average. Price is still trading within this up bars range, so there's no huge amount of danger. There is still supply being drawn out, so sellers are still active in this market despite the push higher. You can see the volatility in this market, especially so. I would expect at least a test for supply early next week, and then a response depending on how much supply is drawn out. If supply continues to be drawn out, you'll probably see price pull back to this level. And supply eases somewhat, you may see an attempt to push up to this level here. So that's your range at the moment. Most likely in here, this is your range. A breakout above that would be pretty bullish. A breakdown below here would be bearish. This is the ASX consumer discretionary, and it's really pushed lower over the last few weeks. We were down here previously. Price is threatening to break down here. Here's your breakdown bar. Confirmation. This week saw spread narrow, close in the middle. Volume reduced but remain above the average. There's an attempt to support the market here. There's no doubt about that. Now, it may not be successful, but there's an attempt to support the market. So perhaps this market thinks that things are a little overdone now, and there's some value to be found in here. You've got this level through here, which the market has closed clearly below. Here's last gasp lows. So you can see where the market is. There's an attempt to support the market here. We'll have to watch to see how successful that might be. This is the ASX property sector, and it's also trading lower under pressure from the more recent events. You can see price threatened to break down here on average volume. It was reduced volume. There's just no buyers in the market here, and that breakdown was confirmed on this bar. Now, this market may have pushed lower than you would expect as well. Here's the previous support level. Here's the last gasp lows. The market's right in that zone now, so you may see an attempt to support the market next week. They may not be successful, but you may see an attempt to do so, especially if markets overseas stabilise, at least in the short term. If not, you may see a push down to test these last gasp lows. Either way, I expect the market will trade in this zone next week. Now just back to the parent index quickly. You can see why the mid caps and the small ords are threatening to break down. They may well have broken down. You can see that in the financial sector, the largest sector on the Australian Stock Exchange, has seen some support come in, and that's reflected in the parent index, where price did push below previous support but didn't threaten the lows of the range here, and instead the market did find some support, and that's pretty much come from the financial sector. Volume was pretty high this week, so that just shows you the degree to which the market was being supported, mostly through financials. Some of the other sectors as well, but mostly through financials. I think this market may attempt to recover back to this level, especially if there's still strong support in the financial sector. If there's really serious weakness emerged, prices coming back to this level for sure. But I think there may be an attempt to push up here. You may find there's a test for supply early within this range, early next week, and then a push up towards this level if there's not overwhelming supply in the market. And this market's also been very reactive to the events that are occurring overseas and to how overseas markets are trading. So it's really not trading on its own merit so much as reacting to what's happening both overseas and on overseas markets. Okay, thanks for your time. Should be back again next week. See ya.